So here's a question. Why do so many married Christian couples still have hangups around sex? It's hard to talk about, hard to deal with, and generally causes more trouble than joy. We're going to deal with that topic today on Pastors on Porn. Well, I thought it would be probably a great guy to have and talking about discussion, Kyle, who works with an online community along with Alana and Tierra. This is the goal of their online community, to foster a supportive community where couples are empowered to redeem and reclaim their marital sexuality in line with God's beautiful design. Now, that's quite a mouthful, so welcome aboard, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Vern. This is going to be great.
Yeah, you've got we've got a lot to cover today in a short amount of time, but because we call this Pastors on Porn, I know I listened to a little bit of your testimony, and you don't bring in just a pure, pristine background to the area of sexuality. You have some of your own sexual brokenness. Tell me a little bit of your journey in terms of porn and sexual brokenness and kind of what's got you to this point.
For sure. So, yeah, kind of a classic upbringing, Christian family, Christian parents. I have one brother, and I'd say my first introduction to pornography was probably around grade 5 or 6. I don't
Okay.
remember exactly my age, but
Mm-hmm.
I remember two instances very clearly. One, I was at a friend's house, and he pulled out a magazine. And now I forget the name of the magazine because it wasn't Playboy and it wasn't one of the big ones. It was a smaller one.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember him kind of showing me like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And I was like, "Well,
Right.
this looks pretty good."
Yeah.
Um, and the other one I remember is I was on dial-up internet back in the day,
Okay.
and we I was just surfing around, and I had a pop-up, and
Mm.
it was just full-on nudity, and so I
Mm.
clicked, and that led to led to the beginning, and that
Mm.
kind of became a several times a week thing,
Yep.
finding different websites here and there. And I'd say it really ramped up in high school.
Okay.
Um, and as a younger kid, it was kind of like, you'd try to get to see the bikini on TV, or you'd
Yep.
watch. I remember WWF when the women would wrestle and they would be wearing, skimpy outfits.
Right.
That was kind of where I got it as a younger kid, and then when the internet became a little bit more popular and a little bit more available, and then the iPhone and all that, and mobile became a thing, then I would say it really got to be an issue for me, to the point
Mm.
where that's when, shame and guilt and all those
Right.
things really started to weigh heavy on me. So I got through high school, and I remember I was dating a girl at the time. We dated for a long time, almost 5 years. And I remember about halfway through that relationship, I remember saying to her, like, I kind of confessed.
Yeah.
And I remember her response kind of like, "So?" And I
Mm.
was like, "Okay, interesting." And I didn't really think much of it, but looking back now, I was like, man, that was so like unhealthy to
Right.
have that kind of response, and that kind of, in a way, was like validating, like, hey, it's not that bad, like, who cares?
Right.
Like, oh, okay. Um, so yeah, high school, bad, shame, guilt. I played a lot of
And
sports.
yeah, and you tell this great story because one of the challenges of people in ministry or people profess to be Christians is living integrity. I remember your story about the sports trip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's exactly where I was going. So yeah, we were on a trip down in Moses Lake, Washington. I played high level baseball, so this was one of the big tournaments we would go to every year.
Yep.
And I remember we were in the hotel room. I was a rookie on the team, so rookies slept on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one evening, everyone kind of came to our room as the hangout room. And I remember the guys were in the corner and they were looking at porn together, and they said, "Hey, Ends, come on over here, see this." And I remember saying, "No, I don't do that stuff. I don't look at that." And just feeling this, like, just this kick in the stomach,
Right.
feeling like, you piece of crap, you are so hypocritical. And yeah, that's a moment I'll never forget. Just this massive, massive hypocrisy.
Right.
But that's, shame was weighing on me, and guilt was weighing on me, and it was this hidden thing for a long time. And then I remember I confessed to my parents,
Mhm.
like 2010, I want to say.
Okay.
And right away, as they purchased Covenant Eyes for me, and they did all the stuff, and it helped for a little bit, but it wasn't. They weren't super involved in it. They didn't
Mhm.
like kind of follow in, check up. So I'd find a device that didn't have it, or I would always find a way around it. I mean, as you and your listeners know, it's
Yep.
available. It's everywhere you want to find it, you can get it.
Right.
So that kind of went that way for a while, and then started dating my wife
Okay.
in 2013, and she had a mentor at the time, extremely wise. Actually, still has the same mentor, extremely
Mhm.
wise woman, and our church was offering, or our church was promoting. They weren't offering it themselves at the time, but they were promoting Freedom Session,
Yep.
which is basically like a 12-step program,
Mhm.
not for porn, but for anything. So it's
Yep.
a 12-step program to overcome whatever you want. And so we both enrolled in that. And during that, we ended up getting engaged. And Freedom Session ended up being like the best premarital counseling we ever got,
Oh
because
yeah.
it was, here's everything about me. Here's every bad thing I've ever done. Um, and I had a good period of sobriety kind of through that,
Yep.
after that, into the marriage. But it didn't take long for it to kind of come back in my marriage around, say, year two ish,
Oh,
somewhere between 1 and 2.
you're doing better than most. I usually get between 6 months and 12 months is when it reemerges in marriage. So you must have
Yeah.
been, yeah. Okay.
um, and so, yeah, I told my wife, and yeah, it was kind of the same thing. Covenant Eyes,
Yeah.
get it on all the devices. She put it on her devices. Every device in
Mhm.
the house had it. But then work became my temptation,
Yeah.
because work obviously didn't have it.
Mhm.
So work was kind of where I would go for that, or um, certain apps on the phone are pretty easy. Anyways, it all came to a head in May of 2021,
Okay.
and my wife got a Covenant Eyes report from me, and it showed what I had seen or what I had looked at that week. And she looked at me and she said, "You need to get help."
Right.
And I was
Busted.
like, "Okay, yeah, exactly, right." So then it was, okay, time to go find some help. And so we had a really good counselor at our church, and so I reached out to him. I said, "Hey,
Yep.
this is what's going on. I need help. Can you help me, or can you guide me to where I need to go?" And so he sent me two referrals. Um, One got back to me right away. It's Dr. Dave Curry,
Mhm.
and he has a big program that kind of he calls Regroup, and it's
Right.
basically just a big program for guys like myself with any form of unwanted sexual behavior, sexual addiction, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay.
Um, I've been in the program now since then.
Mhm.
I haven't left. There's kind of like, there are some rules about leaving. Like, they want you to be at least 1 year clean, be a
Yep.
regular participant. Your wife needs to sign off on it. Your small group leader needs to sign off on it.
I
Your
like
pastor needs to
that.
sign off on it.
I like
So
that.
yeah, it's a really good program. I've had almost 900 days of sobriety,
Hmm.
and yeah, and I keep going back every week. So every week it's a group meeting. We got to talk, and then group discussion, and then small group discussion. And
Well, okay.
they they offer, or they recommend everyone do a 12-step program for it as well. But
Mhm.
because I'd done Freedom Session around the same thing already, um, I didn't do the 12 steps through them, but I still do the
Right.
regular weekly meetings.
Kyle, first of all, congratulations. That's so encouraging and exciting to hear what is happening with where you've been at in terms of sobriety. And I know that's been hard fought for. I know you've stayed in community. You've not left at the first sign of success, where a lot of guys
Mm-hmm.
do. I think I'm good now. And it's interesting
Yeah.
now that you found your way into a ministry, which is all about reclaiming healthy marital Christian sexuality, called Kingdom
Yeah.
Ministries. I'm sorry, Kingdom Sexuality. And
Yeah.
and I want to just talk a little bit about Christians and sex, because I mean I work in the Finding Traction podcast. I mean, I work with Christians, Catholics, Orthodox. I've worked with JWs, Mormons, atheists, agnostic. I have an Aztec and a Stoic. I've worked with all sorts of people. but Christianity seems to have a really mixed history with sexuality. I mean, if you were a Hindu, you would have the Kama Sutra. You know, if you were
Yeah,
Jew,
yeah,
if you were a Jewish person, you would have the Song of Solomon. Of course, Christians, we try to spiritualize that away. That's just a spiritual analogy. It's like BS. But
yeah,
but
totally.
Christians, what's the deal? What are you thinking as you deal with people? Why is there so many hang-ups still, and there's such a disconnect between this idea of God's beautiful design for marital sexuality?
Yeah, I wish I had a perfect answer for you, but I don't. But just to spitball here a little bit, I mean, yeah, we see all the time. We get so many messages from people like, "Hey, you know, my husband and I are married now. We're really struggling with this. Nobody ever talked to us about this."
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really understand why it's not talked about.
Right,
Um, it because I grew up in a church kind of while I was dating, engaged, and now married, and it's very much talked about. Our church
right.
doesn't shy away from this stuff. It's very much talked about in a really healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it's hard for me to relate sometimes when these people send these messages and it's like, hey, no one ever taught me about this. I'm like, I don't really know what to tell you because I didn't grow up like that. But I think a lot of it, I did grow up with quote unquote purity culture,
Right,
right? I remember hearing a lot of those messages. And I think at its foundation, purity culture was a really good thing, right?
yep,
Don't have sex until you're married, stay pure.
right.
But I think the delivery was a big miss, right? With
Mm,
people saying, if you do, you're giving away part of yourself. I remember I was at youth group once and the pastor grabbed some Play-Doh and he merged two colors together and he's like, if you do this, then you've got another color. And look at what you are kind of
right.
once you've
Wow.
given yourself away to all these people. And it's like, man, what a damaging message.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think well intentioned.
Yes.
I think all the intentions of purity culture were really good. And it wasn't immediate that it was having this negative impact. So I think the church has tried.
Right.
I think now looking back, we see purity culture as, I don't want to say a failure, but a kind of a miss.
Mm,
So yeah, Christianity in the church. I think at the base level, there's kind of this we don't know. We
right.
don't know the best way to deliver this message, so we're not even going to do it. We're just going to, say a little surface level stuff. We're not going to get into the weeds or anything because, either the pastor feels awkward talking about it, he doesn't want to talk about it, or he just doesn't know the best way to deliver the message.
Right. Yeah, and you look back, if you do any cursory view of Christian history, you know that most Christian history was taught by celibate Christian men. You're going,
Right?
well, how is that going to go wrong?
Yeah.
Who are
Yeah.
trying to stay away from women, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, gee, I don't know why that could come out sideways,
Yeah.
in terms of some of this. But
That's like
that
getting marriage counseling from someone who's not married.
yeah, or parenting counseling from
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I had all sorts of great answers about how to raise kids before I had three of my own. But yeah, and I think that's kind of the challenge that we're facing. One of the things I love about your online community and website, again, it's Kingdom Sexuality. You guys are really trying to redeem that, trying to reverse
Mhm.
that. This idea, you know, and we used to do a marriage course for like 15 years using Gottman stuff, and when we got to sexuality,
Yeah.
we would pose all sorts of questions. Okay, we want you to go and we want you to discuss these 10 questions around your sex life. And it was so awkward for couples, not just because it was in a public place, but talk about what you like, what you don't like, talk about what time of the day you like to have sex, what would you like to do differently. And it's because couples were like frozen. Well, how do we do that? And I mean, you guys, you got topics like sexual, spiritual intimacy, but you guys get into oral sex, sex toys. There is very few topics that you guys are not willing to talk about from a male and female place. And that is so refreshing. Whether or not people agree with all of your conclusions, I mean, I don't agree with all my conclusions at times. So tell me, tell me a little bit about what the aim of what you guys are trying to do, because it feels like you're pushing the boundaries, but I love the direction you're going. So give me a bit of an apologetic for what you guys are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you take the secular view of sex that we see in today's society, it's viewed as this, you know, go get as much of it as you can because it's awesome.
Right.
And we're trying to kind of take that idea and bring that into the Christian context and say, it's this really awesome thing. Go have as much as you can because it's awesome, but do it within the context of marriage as defined by God in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be even better than the secular version. Yeah, we're trying to take sex and make people realize that it can be this really awesome, connecting, pleasure-filled, God-honoring thing, and not this thing that's only for procreation with the lights off once a month. That it can be such an important aspect of your marriage to bring you together, to honor God, to honor each other. And we're trying to help couples have those conversations that maybe they didn't get in premarital counseling, or maybe they didn't do a follow-up after their first year of marriage to see how things are going. So it's these really candid, open, honest, hard conversations so they can learn the truth of kind of what God's intention is for their sex life. And it's not something we need to feel ashamed about because of our past, or feel awkward talking about it with our spouse, or feel like we can't go to anyone with our questions because there's no space for it. So we're trying to make that space for it. Is to kind of shine God's light on topics that have been left in the dark. So we talk about sex, but like you said, more than that, it's okay. How do you talk about sex as a couple? How do you talk about oral sex? How do you talk about sex toys? How do you ask your spouse for something that you want, but you don't know how they're going to respond? How does kids affect your sex life? What to do when you're in that postpartum period? Kind of all these different things that, to no fault of their own, maybe couples haven't thought about, or maybe their premarital counselor didn't ask those questions because they only had 2 sessions with them or whatever it was.
They probably never raised, what do you think of shower sex? I thought that was a great topic in there.
Right. So yeah, all these types of things. And we're just taking topics from our listeners. Our listeners send us all the time, hey, can you guys cover this? Okay, yeah, sure. And I think the interesting thing that maybe makes us a little bit different than the other podcasts or the other ministries out there is none of us are professionals. We have no formal training in counseling or marriage or sex or any of this stuff. We're just sharing from kind of what we know, what we've experienced, and kind of what's gone well for us. So I think it's really relatable for the listener because they can say, hey, that person's just like me. They're not listening to a marriage and family therapist. They're not listening to a sex therapist or a pastor or whatever it is. So I think we come across really relatable. And we've now even taken it a step further where we have this kind of marriage membership. We've called it Unite and Ignite, where we want you to become more united as a couple and reignite your marriage. And so what we've done is each month we're taking a different aspect of marriage and we're helping you guys kind of reignite and reunite in that area of marriage. So we started it in September. Last month we did fun. Like, how do you have fun again as a couple? How do you bring fun back into your marriage?
Love it.
So how it works is kind of every day we send you an email and we give you one topic, one thing to do that day. Really easy thing today. Usually takes like 15 minutes or less. It's something that parents can do after the kids are down. It doesn't take a lot of energy, doesn't take a lot of time, but it's fun. It's a way for you guys to get intentional in your marriage to bring whatever this aspect is kind of back into the marriage. And then we also add what we call a spice it up option. So how can you kind of make this thing and kind of lead it to more sexual intimacy maybe?
Right.
So right now in October, we're doing romance. Next month in November, we're doing spiritual intimacy, which I think is going to be a really awesome month. And then in December, we're going to do sexual intimacy, which is kind of our bread and butter, if you will. But yeah, it's been really interesting so far. We've got lots of good feedback from people. Couples have kind of been exactly what we want. They've been reunited and reignited in their marriage.
Right. Well, you don't need to be a professional to have a good sex life. I heard that somewhere. Actually, Kyle, I heard a great story talking about, the old sex is for procreation. a pastor, one of my old pastors, when he was in seminary, he had this guy that taught that from seminary. That was what he was
Wow.
teaching. Now he had 7 kids. So all the students called him Professor Sure Shot. That was his name because
Nice.
apparently,
Nice.
he really had a good shot when it came to how to limit his sexuality to having kids. So
Wow.
well, I want to end on this question because this is probably the most personal for me and the biggest challenge for guys that I work with who I have a rich porn history, Kyle.
Hmm.
I've seen many things. I've been
Hmm.
to many
Hmm.
places. And here's the challenge that guys like me struggle with. We have a really hard time because our world I have pornified my world. So,
Hmm.
so what happens when I approach my sexuality? Everything I learned about sexuality from the time I was 10, 11, and 12 came through pornography.
Yeah.
And I have a really difficult time redeeming that or not feeling all of the guilt and everything that came out of my porn binges. How do you guys talk about reclaiming that for guys that have a completely messed up, pornified view of sexuality? Talk a little bit about that journey because that's a really tough thing to navigate for me and for guys.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, one thing I kind of left out of the end of my testimony is part of, this regroup program that I'm in is, reigniting your relationship with Christ, because that has to be the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing. That has to be the best thing in your life. And our pastor used to say to addicts, he used to say, you can't just eliminate an addiction and not fill it with something.
Right.
And the thing that you fill it with has to be better than what the addiction was. You have to have more affection for whatever you fill it with than whatever that addiction was. And
Mm-hmm.
ideally, what you fill it with as a Christian is a deeper, more intimate relationship with Christ, where that fills you up more
Right.
than whatever artificial filling you were getting from whatever it was before. And so through regroup, it's, morning prayer, evening prayer, getting back into your Bible, reinvigorating your relationship with Christ. And I think that's kind of where we have to start. Um, you have to, and we've got to pray about it. We've got to ask God to redeem that in us because He will.
Mm-hmm.
He absolutely will. It's just like a couple who has sex before marriage
Mm-hmm.
and thinks, "Oh, what the heck? Why should we even bother stopping? We've already done it." No, no, no. If you stop, God honors that. God will redeem your sex life.
Mm.
And I think understanding, one, that God can redeem it, and two, that He will redeem it.
Right.
And really being intimate with Him through prayer and through the Word, and starting there, that has to be kind of step one. Now, outside of that, and not to over spiritualize anything, but I think we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace here, because who's to say that just because you saw that thing in porn, you wouldn't have been curious about it otherwise?
Hmm. Okay.
So let's take oral sex for example,
Mm-hmm.
something that we see in pornography, but who's to say that in our own marriages we wouldn't have been curious about that anyways?
Okay. Good point.
And I think that was really freeing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some guys can take it too far and they can use that as a way to justify something
Right. Or
that they shouldn't be.
or pressure beyond where the other other partners willing.
Exactly.
Okay. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. I think there's that. Um, but I think sex is meant to be explored. It's meant to be adventurous. God gives us tons of freedom within the bedroom.
Hmm.
And I think that we shouldn't kind of box ourselves into whatever we think sex should be.
Hmm.
I think we need to kind of be feel more free to be adventurous, feel more free to do these things. And you know what? Yes, you might have seen it in porn, but you can redeem that in your marriage, right? Because the way it was probably done in porn is probably not a very good way of however it was done. And
Mm-hmm.
so you can redeem that in your marriage, and you can do it in a God honoring, spouse honoring way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily think that just because you've seen it in porn means it's bad and it's off limits.
Right. It
So,
reminds me of throwing out all of my rock albums when I was a young, impressionable Christian at 14. And then I mean, I even threw out the Carpenters, that's hard to believe, but Kiss and AC/DC and all, and all my rock music was bad. And then I eventually realized, you know what? I still love music and
Totally,
redeeming
totally.
my love of music and but yeah, the guy that's helped me there is the therapist. I don't know if you've heard Andrew Bowman. He talks about recalibrating our sexuality. He's a therapist, works with
Hmm.
Dan Allender. And, there's three
Oh yeah.
steps of turning the engine off is one, and then number two is dealing with some of the unmet needs that we have that we've gone to porn for. But the third one that we're approaching is how do we recalibrate our entire approach to sexuality around,
Yeah.
moving out of a pornographic style of relating, or a pornographic mindset and a pornographic style of relating. And I think what you're describing is recalibrating that, saying, okay, whatever the enemy meant for evil, God means for good, right? In terms of that.
Hmm. And I think too, um, like I'm a massage therapist. That's what I do in my day job. So if
Mm-hmm.
someone were to come in, kind of the trend that we're seeing in the research is if doing something is painful, we need to take a period of rest, just like you said, turning the engine off. And
Mm-hmm.
then we need to kind of go back to the beginning. So let's say a squat, or
Right.
let's take something more practical. What is something that we do every day? Let's say a shoulder check is
Okay.
something that this patient is really struggling with. So we need to take some rest the body for a period of time, and then we need to slowly build back up because the tolerance for that movement has been
Mm.
diminished. So now we got to go back to the beginning and we need to start with something. So let's say a shoulder check. So we're not going to do the full shoulder check, but we're going to resist ourselves and we're going to turn into our hand to activate those muscles, but we're not actually going to do the movement. So those muscles are going to be
Mm.
activated, but we're not going to be moving. And then we're going to maybe we'll do a longer hold and then we'll move 50% and then we'll move 75% and we'll work up to 100%. So kind of that
Mm.
same idea of recalibrating, kind of like facing a fear, right? If you have a fear of spiders, okay,
Yeah.
look at a picture of a spider, touch the picture of the spider, look at a real life spider, hold a real life spider, kind of that same idea. And yeah, I love the word you use, recalibrating, and kind of using that as a way to redeem it. The other thing I thought about was counseling has been huge for us. My wife and I go annually
Mm-hmm.
for at least just a checkup, if not one, two, three, four times, whatever the counselor thinks.
Yep.
And this is whether things are good or bad. Counseling
Mm-hmm.
has been huge in our lives. And I think one thing that um, usually under the guidance of the counselor, but some sort of sex fast.
Mm-hmm.
When you're coming out of this addiction, you've had some um, when you're kind of coming into your recovery, having a fast, having 60, 90 days where there's no
Mm-hmm.
sexual activity
What? I'm
as a
just kidding.
way.
Just kidding.
No, some guys probably had that exact reaction when I said that, for sure.
Keep
But it's
going.
a way
Sorry.
to, because we know the brain is plastic. We
Mm-hmm.
know the brain can be rewired. So
Mm-hmm.
this rewiring of our brain through pornography, where our brain says, naked woman turned
Mm-hmm.
on a screen. So now we've got to rewire our brain to, okay, wife, beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
naked, turned on. And we had that rewiring. It can happen because we know our brains are plastic, which means they can
Right.
be kind of remolded and we can build new neural pathways. But it also takes time. And so a no sexual activity fast can be a
Mm.
great way to help that rewire where there's no sexual activity at all. And then when we have the sexual activity come back, it's wife. And that
Right.
rewiring can
Right.
begin.
Okay. Well, Kyle, just to end, tell us a little bit more about the online community. Let gals know how they can connect with you and connect with what you guys are doing.
For sure. Yeah, I'd say the biggest place that we are is Instagram. So if you just go to Kingdom Sexuality on Instagram, all one word, you'll find us there. We also have a podcast, comes out every Monday, and that's just Kingdom Sexuality Podcast. We are wherever you listen to your podcast, you'll find us there. And then, yeah, if you wanted to check out that new membership club we have, Unite and Ignite, you can go to KingdomSexualityministry.com/unite and ignite.
Love it. Kyle, great having you on. Thank you so much for pushing my boundaries a little bit, helping me recalibrate a few things. And again, I know a lot of listeners will really want to check that out. I heard about one of the guys I coach from Australia. He says, you gotta listen to these guys and gals. They're great. They're from Canada up where you live. And so, anyways, that's how I heard about it. So thanks again for being on the podcast.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
All right. We'll see you everyone later.